We've talked a little bit about the tonal method in other lectures, and it's such a wonderful, wonderful way to draw, and it really prepares you so well for a career in painting. And what we need to do is obviously use the proper materials that allow us to get the most out of memorization, techniques, repetition. We don't want anything too expensive, but we don't want anything too cheap. We want pencils that will sharpen to a very long taper, but that aren't brittle, that aren't full of pits or little rocks that you sometimes get in some of the charcoal pencils. So there's only a handful of pencils that I have found over the course of the last, say, 26 years I've been working, studying these methods, that actually are conducive to drawing in this methodology. So the first thing we're going to talk about is the board with which you're going to clip your paper on, okay? These are the standard clipboards that you can get at any art store, and they run like, anywhere from $11 to say $15. And they have these clips that come with them, and they usually have a rubber band at the bottom that I usually remove, and that's just to keep the pad from moving around on you, but I have never found them to be all that practical, or I just don't use them. You may want to use them. But so we have these clipboards, and those are the standard clipboard that I'll probably recommend that you use, okay? The other one that you can use is a little more expensive board, and it's a light kind of hardboard that just is really kind of nice to carry around. It's not too cumbersome. And then if you do use this option, you're going to need to pick up some of these black clips. And these clips you can get at any hardware store or at any office supply store, things of that sort. And they're usually like 50 cents, so they're not much. You can probably pick up 3 or 4 of them. They're always practical to have for other purposes anyway. So anyway, this is another valid option. As far as the paper that we use, we don't want to use a ridiculously expensive archival paper. We will move on to that in later sessions when we get into archival drawing methods. We will use then handmade papers and different paper materials to get different effects and things of that sort. Right now, for the bulk of the training in these fundamental lessons that you're going to be embarking on, is going to be smooth newsprint, okay? Not rough newsprint, because people always make that mistake in my classes and they bring in this rough paper, and then we have to fight the nap of the paper to get smooth tones, nice edge manipulation, and that can be just really a deterrent when you're trying to learn this method. So let's make sure that you get a smooth newsprint. Canson makes one, Seth Cole makes one, Strathmore makes one. It's a recycled. You may want to stay away from the recycled papers. I'm all for the green thing, but the recycled papers have a tendency to wrinkle very quickly and age a lot quicker than the normal papers. A normal pad may cost you $10 or something in that range. They're very reasonable. You can use 100 sheet or 50 sheet. It doesn't really matter. But just make sure it's smooth. That's the thing I really want to emphasize. Paper aside, what we're going to use to work on this smooth newsprint, because we're going to be doing hundreds, even thousands of drawings over the course of many years to perfect and to absorb information and memorize information. So we want something we can repeat, but it's very economical, okay? The charcoal pencils. Now the charcoal pencils that I have found that are most conducive to this technique, there's about 3 or 4 of them. Now there may be some more out there that I don't know about, but I've tried an awful lot of them, and they just really don't sharpen to a long taper very well. The Conte 1710B pencil, now don't worry about writing that down because we're going to have that on the supply list PDF that you can download, and we'll have some manufacturers or some supply places that you can go to and get these. I would order them in boxes of 12 because you're going to be going through them. When I first start teaching my classes and I introduce people to this method, it's amazing the amount of whining and talking about the sharpening, how hard the sharpening is, how cumbersome. Can we make a pencil sharpener to sharpen these things? You want to remind yourself that everything in drawing and painting comes down to discipline and focused effort. So even the aspect of sharpening the pencil can be a Zen-like exercise, one that focuses your attention. Say you're driving to class and you come in and you've had a difficult time getting there and there's been traffic, or you've had an argument with your significant other. I don't know, anything could happen. You want to decompress a little bit, and you want to prepare yourself for the process of absorbing information visually, and you need to be in a very conducive state to do that. And the pencil sharpening I found, I just go back, put it in one of the trash cans, and I sit there and it's kind of meditative for me. I just kind of relax and I go through the process of sharpening up, say 2 or 3 pencils. The reason you want more than one is because you are going to break them, especially when you're first starting in this method. because it's just sometimes they're brittle, sometimes your hand is not as subtle as it should be. Ultimately, what we're trying to use this pencil to do is to be able to calligraphically manipulate it from our joints, from the wrist, from the elbow, from the shoulder, very much like a paintbrush. And as we do that, we're able to get thick to thin line weight variations. I'm going to demonstrate that momentarily in another little lesson for you guys that will show you one of the reasons why we sharpen the pencil this way and why it's so effective and why you're going to really want to spend time to perfect that art of sharpening your pencils. Okay, so I've got the 1710B Conte pencil. That's like a tongue twister. But that's the pencil that's like the workhorse pencil for what we use because it's most durable, it's very sound, and seldom has fractures and inconsistencies in it. You're going to occasionally get pencils that have little hairline fractures in them and they just crumble as you sharpen them. Try to be patient, try to relax, and try not to get too caught up in that. And just, it's going to happen periodically. It's manufacturing issues. I don't know where that comes from. But the other pencil that we use quite often is the Primo. Now the Primo is a B pencil also. You can also use, say, a 3B if you have a very subtle hand, but I wouldn't recommend it. If you're just getting used to the pencils, I would stay in that B range for the Conte and for the Primo. And you're going to find the Primo is a skinnier charcoal lead or charcoal shaft, and that it's a little more difficult to sharpen because of that. It's a little more brittle, and it's a little softer. So the B in Conte is not exactly the same as the B in Primo, and so on and so forth. So you have to sometimes find the grade of pencil in that brand that is reminiscent or acts like a B, okay? So the Primo is a good one as well. One of the last ones that I will talk about is the Wolf Carbon pencil. Now in the Wolf's Carbon, excuse me, this pencil is a 6B or a 4B is equivalent, in my experience, to the B. So you don't want to get a B in the Wolf's Carbon because it'll be so hard that it'll not only be hard to sharpen, but just you will not be able to get the kind of edges, just be very frustrating for you. So either a 4B or a 6B in that pencil. Now those are the three pencils that I use most, and I will switch between them. There's a couple little idiosyncrasies or difficulties with layering some of them. For example, the Wolf's Carbon, for some reason, won't go down, or it won't go down over the top of Conte sometimes, or it won't go down that well over the top of certain areas that have been erased on your paper. So that can be a little frustrating if you're trying to do a multi-layering technique where you use your Wolf Carbons to lay in with, and then say you do your Conte for your more broad stroke or your mapping and your shading, which I sometimes often do as mixed pencils, just because some of them have, to me, better characteristics for certain aspects of rendering or things of that sort. But you should find that each one of these pencils allows you to get the full range from 0 to 10 in your value range out of that one pencil. And it's easy to erase and it doesn't smear that much. It's the most amazing pencil I think I've ever seen, these pencils. Whereas with the graphite pencil, you'll have to work your way up the chain of pencils, and it might take you, you got to go from the HB to the, or the B to the, 2B, all the way up through the range in order to get to a black. And it's just frustrating to have to keep, have so many pencils and also replace them constantly. But we will use those pencils, like I said, for high-end archival rendering techniques where you're spending 15, 20, 30 hours on a drawing, and you're really going to that really virtuoso level of finish. But these other pencils we're going to be using because we can emulate painting very easily with them. Okay, so enough about the pencils. I will demonstrate, like I said, sharpening them in a different lecture. Kneaded erasers. Now these are the funny little guys that come. They come kind of in this, square packaging. You can get them small, big, but I would get one of the bigger ones. What you do is you tear off a chunk. You don't need much. So you tear a section of it off, and you just use a small piece of it, something about maybe, say, that size. Okay? And the whole point is that you kind of knead it and you create it into a workable shape, almost like a brush. And you're not just using it as a correction device. A lot of people think, oh, it's an eraser. I erase mistakes with it. Well, that's one purpose for the eraser, but another purpose is simply to use it as a carving or sculpting tool. We could think of it that way. We could also think of it like our white paint. We have our charcoal, which is our dark, our paint, and we have the kneaded eraser, which is our lighter paint. And we're going to be going in and we're going to be carving shape, manipulating edges, doing all kinds of stuff, blotting out little areas, using it like a glazing tool, all kinds of uses. And when it starts to saturate itself with charcoal, what you want to do is you just knead it, hence the name, kneaded eraser. and it'll go back to a nice gray color. Now, as long as it's going back to, it can be a dirty gray too, just as long as it's not like so tarred up with charcoal that when you need it, it's almost gummy and it doesn't seem to go to any kind of different grade. That's when the eraser is really just way too saturated and you just got to chuck them. But these should last you a long time. The hard part is when you drop them in a class, they'll just take off. I don't know where they go. I mean, they end up just disappearing. And so I lose more erasers just way before I ever exhaust their use. So keep an eye on that. And a lot of times it ends up on the bottom of your shoe of all places because you end up stepping on them. And I've got some funny stories I may share with you at some point on that. But these erasers are really nice, and that's really all you need. You don't really need multiple different kinds of erasers. A lot of the erasers don't work that well with charcoal. The Nita eraser is your best bet by far. Okay, so we've gone over the charcoal pencils, the paper, the clipboards. We need to have something to sharpen our pencils with. Now this gets into an interesting area because a lot of people use the oddest, craziest things to sharpen these pencils. I've seen buck knives, I've seen little tiny X-Acto knives, just all kinds of stuff. You'd be amazed. And the thing I've found that works best are just these single-edge razor blades that you can get at any hardware store. Now you can pick them up at art stores, but they're going to charge you exponentially more for them as they do with most art supplies. Whereas if you go to Home Depot or you go to Lowe's or wherever you're at, some convenience hardware store, you usually buy a box of these things, like 50 for like $2 or $3. So you don't need to spend ridiculous amounts on them. Now, we will get into why we use them and how we use these blades as we do the pencil sharpening technique. I just want to introduce you to the blade we're going to be using. The next thing that we're going to talk about is our sanding pad. Now, sanding pads are these little guys, and they come in, you can make your own. I've seen people buy different grades of sandpaper and clip them to boards and do different things. These things work just fine. They're a couple bucks. And the main thing is what you do is you sharpen your pencil, you fine-tune the pencil after you've sharpened it to a generally good long taper. And then you use this as a tool just to take out any divots or undulations that may have occurred in the process of doing your sharpening. I've found that after 15, 20 years of doing these pencils, thousands of pencils, I seldom even use my sanding pad anymore because I usually can get it to a really beautiful taper without needing it. But these are great to have. I always have one in my box, and I always have that as an option if I need it, or if I'm just in a really ridiculous speed situation. I just got into class late and I want to get to drawing and I need to just tune it up really quick. I may use the pad. Okay, so another thing that you want to do is you want to have some kind of box. This is kind of a fancy little box one of my students made for me when I first started, so I've had this thing for like 20 years. It's a little metal box that is broken down to hold the various pencils so that they don't get broken. One of the things that you're going to find is that sharpening these pencils is a very difficult thing to do, and at first, and the last thing you want to do is transport it in such a way that you're going to sit on the pencils when you're in the car, or they're inside a bag that you carry and they just get smushed around and break the tips off. That can be really disconcerting and really, not good. So this box has a little holder that holds my pencils actually in it. Now again, you can jerry rig one of these. You can buy some old antique box from an antique store and use that. You can buy the Art Bend boxes from the art store and then put a little kind of foam insert in and then just kind of make a place where the pencils kind of set down in so they don't move around. This one again has a little metal thing that has some clips. Oh, as one falls out, it has a clip here that clips in my pencils. Now that goes into this box. Underneath the box where I carry all the extra pencils, and I just put that in there, and then I close the top on it. It has a little latch on it. Again, like I said, this is a really fancy little box, but I've seen people use cigar boxes, which work extremely well. Again, they make little wooden boxes at most art stores. Just get one, or just the old school, or not old school, but the Art Bend ones that have a little plastic cover that kind of clips in, and you put your pencils down in there, and that keeps them from moving around. Anything like that will work. Just go ahead and make sure that you go out and get something to put your pencils in. Last thing you want to do is have them break after you spent that time sharpening them. Okay, so we've gone over now most of the basics of the materials that we're going to use. Now the cool thing is you're going to basically use these materials for a good when I went to school, I used those materials for the whole time I was there. I still use them. First couple years, it's a very mellow outlay of money in order to get the skills necessary. Because what we're trying to do is, again, absorb huge amounts of information through repetition, copious amounts of repetition. It's key to success in drawing and painting. We've got to repeat, we've got to memorize, and we've got to get that information in there. We don't want to use expensive materials to do that. A lot of people come into my painting classes. They need to be in drawing classes, but they spend time in painting and they're using cadmiums, oil paints, expensive canvases, expensive brushes to try to learn these concepts, and we don't want to do that. So we want to use these kind of really reasonable materials. The next thing is when you set up an area, okay, your work area, it's very important. When you start as a young artist, even some of the more experienced artists, you don't necessarily have this plush environment in order to work. I've worked in old garages, I've worked in corners of rooms, I've worked in all kinds of really non-conducive environments. But what I've always done in those environments is tried to create a little sanctuary for me to study. Doesn't have to be big, doesn't have to be fancy, doesn't have to be expensive. What it does have to be is well organized, clean, reference material organized so that you can get to it quickly. Some little tidbits. I'm sitting on this really beautiful bench that a friend of mine designed, and it's just fantastic. This is like the Rolls-Royce, drawing horse that you stereotypically will see at almost any art school. When I first started teaching 20-some years ago, I built all my first benches, and I just built them very simply after models I'd seen in art classes and things, and they lasted me literally 20 years. I just recently sold a bunch of them off to students and stuff because we didn't need them anymore. But then I also found that you can buy them at some art distributors like Dick Blick and different places have little kits that you can buy, and they usually cost around $100. If you're handy and you have tools and you like to build things, you can always build one yourself. It's kind of a fun little project. It's something you may want to invest in or build if you find that you're really going to pursue this avidly and spend hundreds and hundreds of hours sitting on these things, right? Another way you can do it if you don't know yet, or you're unsure or uncertain of the degree of training that you're going to be doing, you can always sit in a chair and turn another chair backwards. And this can be a very, very comfortable way to study also. And that way you lean the drawing tablet up against your knees and then up against the back of the chair that you've turned around, and then you have a very comfortable posture that's very similar to the posture you would use on one of these benches. So you can do that until you can either build one or buy one. The next issue that we're going to run into with materials is, where do we put our reference material when we're studying? When I was in school, no one really told me this, and it should have been addressed, but it wasn't, and it's not a big deal. But no one told me that your reference should be out in front of you, similar to a model in a model class, so that you don't see distortion. I spent probably the first, I don't know how many months in school with my reference taped to a drawing board to my left or my right at a very oblique kind of abstract angle. And that, I was seeing the reference distorted. And why it didn't click or dawn on me that was going to be a problem, I don't know. But again, sometimes when you're a newer student, or sometimes you've even been doing it for a while, these little things slip through the cracks and can actually cause some problems with distortion in scene. And you want to watch those things because you don't want to build any bad habits when you're training. Those are hard to get rid of later, and better to do it right in the beginning. So what we want to do is we want to get our reference out in front of us. If you're doing the method where you turn the chair backwards and you sit in a chair, simply tape it up to a wall. Tape your reference right up in front of you and sit in front of that wall and just draw off that reference that you've taped up on the wall. That's one way to go. Another method is to use a cheap easel, and I'm going to get up now and put a little easel up and show you. These easels you can get at any art store. They're not that expensive, $20, $30 maybe. And, they just set up, and you can use these for your painting easel too. I did for many years as a student. And, that should work fine. What we do is we want to get the reference so that it sits right up in here and is at a perpendicular angle, or is just at an angle that is not like skewed. And so you just kind of tape your reference on that easel, and you can sit and draw from books. You can draw from handouts that you get and things of that sort. So you're going to want some kind of stuff like this. Now we've also created a little kind of clever reference holder that you can download a template from online and build this thing yourself. They're really easy. You just use a little bit of foam core, And this is a really cool little thing, so I'll show you that right now too. And that's another option for reference holding. Okay, it looks something like this. Okay, this is what it looks like here. I'm going to sit here and just kind of show you it for a second, then I'll clip it on. So it looks like this, okay, kind of a neat little ball. It's very light, very easy to make. Shouldn't take you more than, I don't know, half an hour to make it. And what you'll do is you'll clip this one right onto your drawing board as such with those gator clips that you're going to buy. Again, buy a box of those clips. You're going to use them for all kinds of stuff. Or buy, 10 of them or something, 5 or 10 of them. Anyway, there you go. Now you got another little gator clip, a little mini one that I just threw across the room here. This little mini gator clip here, you can buy these also at any kind of convenience store. I mean, or not convenience store, but any kind of supply store for office supplies. These guys are going to clip your reference up right in front of you, and you're going to have this really nice little work area where you're looking at your reference and you're looking at your surface. And you can download our handouts, our PDFs. They're going to accompany your exercises and lessons as we go through this training regimen with you. And you can just have a very efficient, cheap, easy way to hold your reference. So that should be another really neat thing for you to to take advantage of. Okay. So what we've covered the paper. We've covered what we mounted on. We've covered the board. That is the board. We've covered the charcoal pencils. We've covered the kneaded erasers, the razor blades, the sanding pads, the reference holders, and the work area. The work area being a clean area of your room or your garage or some area that you can just have your own music and just a nice pleasant area to work that you can just kind of lose yourself in this process of active meditation is what I call it, because you're concentrating, memorizing, and applying. Next thing I'm going to do is sharpen a pencil for you. Take a little break and then I'll sharpen one up and we'll go over that with you. Okay? Thanks a bunch.